What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode here, the Side Guys Football Forum. I'm one of your co-hosts from the side, joined as always by my good friend, my good buddy, the other half of the Side Guys, Mr. Tad the Side. And Tad, coming towards the end of our coaching series, we only have today's episode, and then we only have one more coach left to go. Not as many hires compared to, was it last year or 2 years ago where we had to do 10? I remember there's a lot.
I was about to say, I think that was 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago? Yeah, because that's when we got Peterson. We also got Kevin O'Connell,
yeah,
in Minnesota. And yeah, we had a lot more hires. So yeah,
that was
2 years ago.
That was busy. That basically took up our entire summer.
It did. Because, yeah, like I said, that was 10 hires that we had to discuss as far as their new philosophies. But, yeah, we only had about 7 this year, if I remember correctly. So a little less. But, yeah, still quite a few. And, I mean, guys, in case you missed any of our previous episodes, that's the beauty of subscribing to our podcast as well as the YouTube channel. You can always turn back the clock and go listen to those episodes because they give you a lot of great information with all these new head coaches and the new offensive schemes that they're going to be implementing, because it is going to be critical in your fantasy football strategy. Because usually around 4th of July, Tad, that's when you really start ramping up as far as putting together your draft strategy and figuring out guys that you want to target, guys that you're avoiding. I know for you, it's the auction draft. So it's figuring out, maybe I want to spend a lot on this guy, but not so much on this guy. So, I'd probably say 4th of July is that good turning point where it's all right, now everybody's really thinking about fantasy football. And I'm pretty sure at those 4th of July barbecues, a lot of people are talking about oh, how many leagues are you in? And when's your draft and all that stuff? That's a common conversation around that time. So it's coming up, guys. July is next week. We're almost there. So it's coming up pretty soon.
But yeah, no, I'm already kind of strategizing for my draft, but that's partially related to this series. But even after the series is over, guys, we will have preseason rankings. We will have, draft strategies. We're going to dive straight into the fantasy football world. We're going right back in as soon as I get back from vacation, which will be in a couple of weeks. But in July, we're going fantasy football heavy because look, there's a lot of money on the line with a lot of these fantasy football leagues, and we want to make sure you win it.
100%. And yeah, Tad, it's funny you bring up money because, I think that's a great segue to talk about our great sponsors at Underdog Fantasy, because, they've been one of our favorite partners that we ever had on the podcast. And the reason being is because it's such a great app and great website and software, whatever you want to call it. It's really fun to use. It's just a really easy way to get into some sports betting. You can bet across any sport that you want. I know the NBA finals are over along with the Stanley Cup finals, so you can't bet on those, but we're coming upon the MLB All-Star break, so you still got a whole half of the MLB season to go. We're talking about fantasy football. NFL football is right around the corner. You could bet on MMA. You could bet on boxing. You got the Euro Cup for soccer. You got the T20 World Cup for cricket. There's a lot of things that they're covering on Underdog Fantasy, so whatever you're comfortable with, all you got to do is make anywhere between 2 and 8. You could do up to 8 now on Underdog Fantasy. 2 and 8 different prop bet picks across whatever sports you're comfortable with. The more picks you make, the more that you get right, the more potential money you can win. And guys, Underdog Fantasy wants to get you in the action by using the promo code that they provide for us. That promo code is DESAI, DESAI. You can double up on your initial deposit of $10 or more up to $500, courtesy of our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. Hypothetically, if you were to put in that max amount, $500 into the account using our promo code DESAI, DESAI, you could double that up dollar for dollar, and Underdog will give you $1,000 to bet on their platform. So, it's a really great promo code to take advantage of to get into the action. Like I said, if you're not comfortable with all those sports going on, like I said, we're only a couple months away from the NFL action as well as college football action. So, there's a lot of things to be betting on there if you're comfortable with both of those. So, guys, get into it. It's very easy site to use. The apps on both Apple and Android devices, very easy to use as well. So, get in the action. It's a lot of fun. So that promo code, once again, is DESAI, DESAI. double up on your initial deposit, only the first one, of $10 or more, up to $500, courtesy of our good friends at Underdog Fantasy.
I'm going to be looking at those over-unders with the home run derby. I can almost guarantee you that Underdog is going to have, some bets to make during All-Star Weekend. So even when the season pauses, man, they're still going to find some stuff. And you left out one crucial sport that is boosting in popularity, WNBA. I've won a couple WNBA bets.
Yeah, that is definitely getting to the action with all of that as well. So, Tad, like I said, we're coming towards the end of our head coaching deep dive series here. So we got 2 coaches left to go. Today, we're going to be talking about the new Atlanta Falcons head coach, and that is Raheem Morris. He was a former interim coach with the Atlanta Falcons, which we'll get to in a little bit here.
I was texting a friend while I was doing notes on this, and I'm not going to give away the name because I want to see if how good your research was. But I was like, God, his time in Tampa Bay wasn't fair. Try winning with this quarterback. And a buddy texted me, he's like, you mean Desmond Ridder? I'm like, no, not Desmond Ridder, because he completely forgot he used to be the Bucs head coach.
Yeah. So, let's get into his coaching history. So, former player at the University of Hofstra, Tad. Unfortunately, it is a now defunct football program.
I did not know that until it was in your notes.
Now defunct football program. But
is that where Marquise Colston went?
That is, I was just about to bring that up. I was like, that is the illustrious college that produced Marcus Colston, obviously of New Orleans Saints fame. Won a Super Bowl ring with the Saints as well, unfortunately, against your Indianapolis Colts. But yeah,
damn you, Tracy Porter.
Unfortunately, that football program is now defunct, but he played for them. He had compiled 141 tackles in his career from 1994 to 1997 as a safety with the University of Hofstra. He transitioned from being a player to a graduate assistant for Hofstra's defense. He had a brief stop as a defensive back coach for Cornell University in 1999, then went back to Hofstra again to take the same position in 2000. After that, he was able to transition to the NFL, got his first job with, you brought it up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the 2002 season. He was a defensive quality control coach. Yes, he was part of that Super Bowl team that won their first Super Bowl in franchise history. And he stuck with the team through 2005 and was able to land a assistant defensive backs coach as well during his time there in Tampa Bay.
Do you know who the defensive backs coach was? His boss.
Was it Tony Dungy?
It was not. Tony Dungy was Tony Dungy got fired in 2001. Because I always say that's why John Gruden is overrated, because that was not John Gruden's Super Bowl. That was Dungy's. He just wasn't on the team. No, it was Mike Tomlin.
That was my next guess. I was like, I think it might have been Mike Tomlin.
Yeah. It was so Monte Kiffin.
Monty Kiffin.
Monty, thank you, not Monte.
It's with the E, so it's hard to.
Okay, there we go. I was like, that doesn't sound right coming out. But Kiffin was asked by the Steelers when they were, interviewing Tomlin, what do you think of this guy? And Kiffin reportedly said, yeah, Mike Tomlin absolutely deserves the job, but if it doesn't work out, this Raheem Morris guy, he's someone to look out for as well. So that whole Buccaneers defensive coaching squad is just ridiculous.
Agreed. There's a lot of great people that came from that defensive side of the ball because, Tony Dungy was the once head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he was obviously a defensive prodigy. And so,
he was the one that installed the Tampa 2. That was not Gruden.
The very famous Tampa 2 defense was a Tony Dungy scheme or philosophy. So jumping back to Raheem Morris here. So he was with the Buccaneers through 2005. He left the Buccaneers in 2006 to take a defensive coordinator job in the college ranks with the Kansas State Wildcats. Fortunately, defense was not all that great. They ranked 67th out of 119 teams at the time in points allowed per game, and they ranked 70th in total yards allowed. They were tied for 44th in most turnovers forced per game, so maybe a little bit better there. But nothing too extravagant as far as his success with the Kansas State Wildcats there. He came back to the NFL in 2007, once again with the Buccaneers, and this time he was a defensive backs coach. So obviously we talked about Mike Tomlin taking the head coaching job with the Steelers. Well, here is, Raheem Morris taking that same position with the Buccaneers.
Would you do that? Would you leave a coordinator position at a major D1 school for a position coaching in the pros? I'm not so sure I would do that.
Well, if your goal is to coach in the NFL and to, ascend the ranks there, it's like you got to start out small. So it's
you got to start out small, but like we just saw, with the last guy, or the guy we're about to talk about, actually, Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
Where like if you're a really good coordinator in college, you can still make that jump. It's just, I don't know. To me, I would rather be a coordinator in college than like a defensive backs coach.
No, that's fair, but maybe he felt there was more they needed to learn, so that's why he went back to being a position coach. Whereas, like, because clearly I read out the stats.
That is a level of self-awareness I do not have.
Because clearly I read out the stats as far as how well he did at Kansas State. So
that's fair.
Like maybe
he saw the writing on the wall and was like,
yeah, maybe he was going to get fired. He was just like, you know what? You're not going to fire me. I'm going to leave. So
I'm not. You're not breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you.
That's exactly what it is. So maybe that was the situation. I have no idea, but clearly it just didn't work out all that well. Maybe it's just too much for him to handle. So he's like, let me just further refine my skills before I make that leap again. So maybe that's the reasoning. We don't have the full reasoning as to why that happened, but back with the Buccaneers as a defensive backs coach in 2007, assisted in having a defense that allowed the fewest passing yards in the league and the third fewest points allowed in the league as well. They also allowed only 18 passing touchdowns all season long, which is ranked for sixth best in the NFL during that season. He eventually, I mean, we're talking about this here, he landed his first head coaching gig as he took over for Monty Kiffin, who left to coach with his son, Lane Kiffin, at the University of Tennessee. Morris was unfortunately fired after the 2011 season, after he started the 2009 season with 7 straight losses and finished with a 4-12 record. Had an overall coaching record of 17-31 during his time in Tampa Bay. Maybe it was just too quick. Once again, very similar like what we were talking about with Kansas State. Maybe it was just like too quick for him to take that job. It didn't lead to a lot of success, which obviously led to him being fired by the Buccaneers.
There's a really interesting quote he had talking about that. I'll talk about his time in Tampa Bay after we're done going over the rest of his career. But the quote was interesting. He said, "I was always prepared, but I just wasn't ready." He openly admitted, he was like, I just was not ready to take that job. Because I'm sorry, I was kind of glazing over. But did you mention he was 34 at the time of taking this job? Like he was.
I didn't mention the age, but yeah,
at the time he was one of the youngest, if not the youngest coach in the NFL. So
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah,
yeah. That quote of "I was prepared, I was always prepared. I did my job, but like just personality wise, I wasn't ready." Like I was like, okay, no, that actually makes sense.
I also remember when he was hired, I was just like, who the hell is this guy? Because it's just I didn't have all this research beforehand, obviously, during that time, but I was just like, where did this guy come from? And then it's like knowing how well he did, it just, the quote unquote success that he had at Tampa Bay, it's like, it sort of made sense. I was like, guy this young, kind of need a little bit of seasoning. There's very few Sean McVays out there that just could come out of the gate hard and just find success right away at such a young age. And so, that was very, I remember that hire. I was just like, really? Was this the best hire you could have done? But clearly he learned from his mistakes, clearly. So we'll get to all that
hopefully.
Here. So we'll see. So he was obviously fired by the Tampa Buccaneers. He was hired by the then Washington Redskins to be their defensive backs coach for the 2012 through the 2014 season. Part of that very famous coaching staff that gets brought up pretty much on every broadcast whenever they do a Sean McVay game or a Kyle Shanahan game or whatever it is. But that very famous, coaching staff there in Washington, where Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur was the quarterbacks coach, Sean McVay was the tight ends coach, Mike McDaniel was an offensive assistant, Jim Haslett was a defensive coordinator, and Bobby Slowick was a defensive assistant.
You know me as a Rams fan, Jim Haslett, go fuck yourself.
So, I mean, a lot of famous names on that coaching staff, and obviously you throw Raheem Morris onto that coaching staff as well as the defensive backs coach. So, I mean, it's just amazing that they had that much talent. It's led to a lot of great head coaching positions, offensive coordinator positions as well. But just like, surprising Washington did not do that much better with that much coaching staff. And
wasn't that the same team that was that the year they screwed up RG3, or was that years later?
No, that was the same time during RG3.
Okay. Well, I mean, hey, they turned third, fourth round pick and Kirk Cousins into $180 million man. So you got that. Right. Also, the wonderful irony with that staff is the fact that McVay was the tight ends coach, and now the Rams tight end is like fantasy, like toxic. Like I'm staying away from. I don't care who it is in that. Who is their tight end now? Gerald Everett? Did they sign him
with the Rams right now?
Yeah. They signed someone in free agency I'm blanking on, but whoever it is, I'm staying away from.
No need to trust them for sure. Yeah. So eventually, after leaving the Washington team, he was hired by the Atlanta Falcons as an assistant head coach and defensive backs coach in 2015. So he was part of Mike Smith's team there. Stayed with the Falcons in various defensive roles, including being the defensive coordinator during the 2020 COVID season. 2020 also marked the in-season firing of Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, sorry, not Mike Smith. That was Mike Smith.
I was wondering when you said Mike Smith, I'm like, man, he stuck around longer than I thought.
My mistake. It was Dan Quinn, not Mike Smith there. So he took over as the interim head coach with the Atlanta Falcons after Dan Quinn was fired. He finished the season going 4-7, and the Falcons finished going overall 4-12 again. So that's a record he sort of finds a way of sort of meeting every single time there. Yeah. Los Angeles Rams ended up replacing Brandon Staley with Raheem Morris in 2021 when Brandon Staley took the job with the Los Angeles Chargers to be their new head coach. And so he became the new defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. Morris helped guide the Rams to the defensive Super Bowl run in 2021, obviously ended with a Super Bowl ring. During that year, Tad, the Rams defense had the third most sacks in the league, the fifth most interceptions, allowed the sixth fewest rushing yards in the league, allowed the second fewest passing touchdowns as well in the league. So, I mean, very good numbers, very good things that you want to rely on. And, of course, that led to him now becoming the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And so, I mean, like you said, I think he's got a lot of experience. He knows what he's doing, but I think maybe he had to learn from some of his previous mistakes to now hopefully put it all together here with his now second stint as a head coach, like a full-time head coach, not an interim capacity here with the Atlanta Falcons. So we'll see how this turns out for all you Falcons fans out there.
So a couple things to know. First off, you left this out, but it's important because I know some people are going to be like, well, he's the defensive coordinator of the Falcons, 28-3. That's his fault. Actually, that year, he was the receivers coach. There was one year where he randomly got flipped to be the receivers coach. And then after 28-3 happened, they threw him back on the defensive side. Like, we need you. So that's when he became the defensive coordinator again. Before anyone blames him for that, because that was not his fault. I really feel like that was just everyone's fault, but that doesn't matter.
It's a collective effort. I know a lot of people want to place blame on one person or the next, but yeah, that was,
yeah. But, no, so I want to talk. So when this hire was first made, I was actually really happy because I never thought Raheem Morris got a fair shake of things in Tampa Bay. Yeah. And let me tell you, like, just some of the evidence why. So do you know, in the 3 seasons he was the head coach in Tampa Bay, who was the leading passer for that team all 3 years?
Was Josh Freeman a part of that team?
It was Josh Freeman. You are absolutely correct. Josh Freeman, the first round pick out of Kansas State.
Kansas State, he coached. So maybe that's
I was wondering when doing research. I was like, I wonder if there was a connection there.
Could have been.
Also, fun fact about Josh Freeman, he said, I'm going to be the best quarterback taken out of this class. First overall that year, Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
Did not work. So, yeah, I mean, I don't even think Sean McVay could like succeed with Josh Freeman as your quarterback. So first off, like that was just setting him up for failure.
That's true.
You look at who the 2 leading receivers were for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the year he got fired. Do you want to guess?
Was one of them Antonio Bryant?
No.
Okay, then I don't remember who was on that team.
Yeah, it's because they suck. Aurelius Ben.
Aurelius Ben out of Illinois, right? Remember correctly?
Yep.
Oh, Lord.
And look, not to speak ill of the dead, but I'm sorry, man. You were not very good. Mike Williams. Because I don't know if you remember, but Mike Williams died, which actually turns out, I always thought it was like a construction accident. Turns out that had nothing to do with it. He just like, it was very bad timing. But I'm sorry, like he was fine. Yeah. He was fine. So those were the 2 leading receivers he had to deal with. He had LeGarrette Blount, which was like, sure, he was good. I'm not going to take anything away from, Blount being like, oh, he sucked, but like, not really the best number. So if that's the offense you're working with, you're not going to do a whole lot of winning there. And plus, it was just a very impatient front office. He went 10-6 the year before he got fired. He barely missed the playoffs in his second year as head coach. And then, yes, they went 4-12 the next year with some really bad talent, as I pointed out. And the front office was just like, okay, you're gone. Like, where's the patience? And even better example of this is the guy who took over for Raheem Morris in Tampa Bay, Greg Schiano. Schiano only lasted 2 years.
Yeah.
And then they canned him. No coach is going to get it done in 2 years. I don't even think McVay did that. Did McVay have success that early?
He had success pretty quickly.
Okay, well, then in that case, he's the outlier. But bottom line being like, if you make a hire, you've got to stick with it for, at least 3 or 4 years, longer in college, by the way. But the other interesting note that I found, so you threw out all those great stats with the Rams, but I found another interesting stat, and here's where I started kind of cooling on this hire. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So in his times as either head coach or defensive coordinator, this is the total defense rankings where his defense finished. Okay. 2009, 27th.
Okay.
2010, 17th.
Okay.
2011, 30th.
Oh.
Now we're going all the way up to 2020. So that's when he took over for Atlanta as a defensive coordinator. 2020, 29th.
Not good.
2021, 17th. 2022, 19th. 2023, 20th.
Well, he wasn't with Atlanta in 2022 and 2023 because that's when he's with the Rams.
That's what I'm saying, though. That was their total defensive finish. So, like, not terrible, not great. And like you kind of point out with the Kansas State stats, I do wonder how this guy keeps on climbing up the ranks. It seems like people like him. Seems like he's like, that was more of a personality hire than maybe scheme hire. I'm just wondering, I'm like, was this the best you could, especially if Bill Belichick wanted that job? I know Belichick kind of sucked the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He also had to deal with Mac Jones. So I'm not sure if I'm totally putting that on Belichick. I don't know. It seems like that's the word I used when I texted my friend this the other day was curious. I've gone from being like, oh, I like this hire to curious hire. Curious, but it will depend. It'll depend a lot on the staff put around him, but I will be interested to see how this Falcons team looks next year.
I think the big thing that we just expected with Arthur Smith when he was the head coach was just like he had all the pieces. And it was just like about getting the execution done because the defense, I think, is very young and a little underrated. And the offense obviously has all the skill position players that they have. It just didn't work out. Arthur Smith was just a little bit too, steadfast with his offensive philosophy. It wasn't working with the offensive skill players that they had. So that led to their downfall. So hopefully now, like I said, with the more likable head coach and a little bit younger head coach, maybe he's a little bit more of a player's head coach, that could hopefully lead to a lot of changes. And it could finally realize all the talent that they have on that young squad to be contenders, at least in the NFC South. Maybe they won't be able to make a deep playoff run, but just at least in the NFC South, which is a little open, especially like, the Bucks I know are kind of right now the Kings, but it's like they're very
vulnerable. They're very vulnerable.
Exactly. I think that's the best word. Yeah. There was like, you can sort of take advantage of that. So
no, and you're not kidding about that defense. I, try and figure out their offensive scheme, and we're about to get into that. But I was like, all right, let's look at like who they drafted to try to get a, kind of play on it. And other than, and I'm not even counting Penix because that was such a weird pick. But other than Penix, they only drafted one other offensive guy. The rest of they had 6 or 7 other picks, all defense. Like they completely invest in their defense this year.
For sure. All right, Ted. So we're talking about coaching style here, talking about coaching philosophy here. So let's talk about the offensive scheme and how this is going to affect your fantasy football strategy. So last time that Morris was the head coach, he had experienced offensive coordinator under the helm, and that was Greg Olsen, rest in peace. Coming to Atlanta, he has Zac Robinson now. So Zac Robinson is formerly of the Sean McVay tree. And so, this is just, lots of those Sean McVay connections happening already here. And so, coming over to be the offensive coordinator here with the Atlanta Falcons, this is going to be very interesting to see what sort of concepts and what sort of similar philosophies that is going to bring over here. So Robinson and Morris, as mentioned, were in Los Angeles. Morris was the defensive coordinator. Robinson was the quarterback coach and the passing game coordinator. So while the Falcons offense, I think, we see a lot of skill players where we got Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and, Tyler Algier at running back. So it's like they got a lot of great skill position players. But like I've talked about, Arthur Smith just, for some reason, wasn't taking advantage of that. He was just very much just like, we're going to run the ball. We're going to split the, use Kyle Pitts as a blocker instead of a receiver.
Arthur Smith was so bad that he's apparently the reason Mike Vrabel did not get a head coaching job.
Is it very possible?
Because Mike Vrabel said, if you hire me, he's going to be our offensive coordinator. Apparently, all the teams were like, no,
not happening.
We're good.
Not happening. So I think we should see a very big shift from what we saw in previous years under Arthur Smith with that offense to now what we'll see here in Raheem Morris and Zac Robinson. So one of the big things that we saw last year with the Rams was that this is absurd, but Tad, they ran a 3 wide receiver set on 94.3% of all plays last season. So that was league high. It makes sense. It's league high. Like, if you have that high of percentage, 100% is going to be league high. And so, yeah, once you see the same thing here with the skill players that Atlanta has with London and Pitts, and they signed Darnell Mooney, and they also traded for Rondale Moore. So it's like they got more skill players to run a very similar system there. It's like also, Bijan Robinson has receiving skills. Maybe they'll flex him out and they'll run wheel routes with him or put him in the slot as well. Or, like I said, use Kyle Pitts as a receiver, which is where he's more skilled at. Put him at the flex position so that he will run more routes. So I very much see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets happening here in Atlanta. Obviously, they signed Kirk Cousins in the offseason. He is more of a gifted passer, so that's going to benefit him a lot too. He played with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne last year in Minnesota. So seeing that transition here with 3, you got one guy who's probably at that skill level. Kyle Pitts, I think, probably there too. But like Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, maybe we'll see how they develop there. But just more receivers for Kirk Cousins. That's obviously what's going to make this offensive flow here. So I very much see lots of 3 wide receiver sets happening here in Atlanta. I think the big thing too is that the running zone scheme, I think that's what's going to happen here. But you saw Los Angeles, they shifted more to a gap scheme run attack as opposed to the zone scheme rushing attack because they got a lot more lighter boxes. They got a lot more people defending all those 3 wide receiver sets, and then the boxes just opened up. And so that's where Sean McVay and the offense decided to shift to a more gap scheme attack where it's like they can attack through the trenches there. And so that's why we saw Kyron Williams had the success that he had in Los Angeles. And so this is very much going to benefit the run game. I know Arthur Smith was a big proponent of the run game the last couple of years, but if you can build out that offensive attack as far as through the air, that's what will open up the rushing lanes. And so I think hopefully Zac Robinson will use those similar tactics here to get more advantage out of his skill position players, and then that will open up the running lanes as well. So I can see a lot of 11 personnel. So 11 personnel, you got 1 running back and 1 tight end. And I think that perfectly suits what Atlanta wants to run there with Robinson and Kyle Pitts there. So I can see that happening a ton. Condensed formation. So it's like, you're not going to have this very spread out attack like what Kansas City does or Miami. It's going to be very condensed. And so it's like everybody's going to be close to the line of scrimmage. So you don't know who will stay in to block and who will go out for blocks. You don't know who's going to be setting up for blocks on running plays as well. So it just leads to a lot of just, confusion potentially for the defense as far as like you may see one formation in a condensed formation and everybody will be blocking for a run play, but then all of a sudden on the very next play, everybody running out for a passing attack, and that can lead to a lot of big chunk plays possible, some home run touchdowns as well. So I think just this it's very clear. Like, I mean, I can't stress this enough, but it's just like very similar to what we were talking about last week or, a couple last
stole my line. I was going to say the Callahan comparison. Damn.
It's going to be very similar to that. We're just like, we saw that very run heavy approach with Derrick Henry, but now with Brian Callahan, we're going to switch to a pass heavy attack. I think the very similar thing is going to happen here with Zac Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons, where it's like, Arthur Smith tried to set the run there with Bijan Robinson. It kind of worked, but it didn't really work all that well. Now I think we should see a little bit more of an open attack, more passing threats, more running threats as well. I think this will really unlock more of that running game compared to what Arthur Smith was trying to do. So big shift, I think, but I think it should benefit Falcons fans as well as fantasy managers when it comes to their offense and prospects for fantasy football.
Yeah, I completely agree with pretty much everything you said. And I'll dive into the stats in a bit, but this is very unfair to him. He's not here to defend himself. But one of my favorite draft night memories from this past draft was when the Falcons drafted Penix. And we were all like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. And Alfred Rowe just goes, they have Ritter. We're like, no, they don't. Like, where did Ritter go? We're like, he's in Arizona now. So anyway, the Rondale Moore thing just made me think of that. I love that memory.
That's
so
fair.
I'm so sorry I'll throw you under the bus like that. But I'm not. Not too much to add on to it. I have another surprisingly high stat for you. So first off, the Rams passed nearly 60% of the time last year. So it was almost it was 58-42, but really let's just do round numbers, 60-40 pass to run. Which, ranked in terms of like even split, ranked near the bottom of the league. I think it was like 25th or something. But here's the stat that really, kind of stood out to me. When they did pass it, 71% of their passes went to the receivers. Not tight ends, which, like we said, this is why tight end is just a fantasy like quicksand of when it comes to the Rams. 71% of it went to the receivers. Now, I'll be interested and seeing then how that affects Kyle Pitts. Because like you said, they do run a lot of formations with one tight end. Are they going to put a backup tight end? I'm trying to remember who their backup tight end is right now because I actually think he's pretty solid. But are they going to like play him at the backup at the tight end position and then use Pitts more at receiver? I'll be very interested to see how that relationship goes because it is kind of telling. I think this joke is just a joke. I don't think I'm probably reading too much into this, but it is funny how Kyle Pitts is like, hey, man, you throw it my way, I'll give you number 8. And Kirk Cousins took number 18. That there may be something there, but
yes,
yeah, but and I think we did bring this up earlier in the episode of I think the Kirk Cousins aspect of this. First off, yes, it's a veteran passer. It's a guy who is better than anything Atlanta's had the last 5 years. Even if that 5 years includes Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan towards the end was not the same. Trust me, I watched him in Indianapolis. He was not the same. Yeah. God, that was disappointing. But he also has ties to this type of system. Like we said, you got the LaFleur, the McVay going all the way back to his Washington days. So it's a system he's familiar with as well. So I think that'll really help. I'm glad you kind of talked about the offense opening up because this stat really surprised me. For someone who runs it as much as Arthur Smith likes to, he only ran it inside in Atlanta 13% of the time.
That's pretty low.
It's very low. That was dead last in the league last year. And with I know he's more than just a trucking back, but Bijan Robinson's a physical guy. Like get him up, through the gaps. So with that kind of multi-scheme blocking that you talked about, yeah, the running game probably will take a back seat, but the diversity of the running game, I think will open up so much more because it takes the back seat and because the passing game is going to be, like you said, what was it, 94% of the time the 3 receivers are out there? Well, that's the whole point of that offense is to get everybody else to the outside. So just when they're not expecting it, then you hit them with the run. And that's why backs like Kyren Williams did so well. I think that's why Cam Akers and Sean McVay didn't get along very well because I don't think Akers' play style agreed with that offense very much. It's also possible that Akers just sucks, but yeah. But no, I think that this will be more balanced offense. It's going to be, I'm expecting similar stats from Atlanta, 60% passing, 40% running. That's what I'm expecting. But that's not to say that, fantasy wise, you should stay away from the Atlanta backs because I think they'll still have plenty of playing good games. But yeah, I think another crucial thing with this, well, I'll get to that point in a bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. Next segment.
That's fair. But yeah, you're talking about the backup tight ends that they have here so they can flex Kyle Pitts out more. They signed both the backups that the Niners formerly had. So they have Ross Dwelly as well as Charlie Werner, who are built to be blocking backs, that blocking tight ends.
There you go.
So they purely made that decision. That's like, you know what, Kyle Pitts, you're not going to be a blocker anymore. We're going to use him as a receiving.
He's not a blocker. He's big, but he's not a blocker.
Should allow fantasy managers to actually trust him as a relevant fantasy tight end this year. Obviously, still fingers crossed that that's exactly the direction that they're going to go in. But yeah, we still can't make any guarantees. But one last stat that I want to bring up for you here, Tad. Like we talked about the 3 wide receivers stats. You talked about 70% of the passes went to wide receivers. Another big thing that Rams saw a lot of, which I think will carry over, which, like you said, will lead to that 60 to 40% favor in the passing attack. A lot of their concepts, a lot of their passes, were on screenplays. So that benefited both the running backs. So Kyren Williams saw a lot of screen passes. But then, like you said, what was Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp good at? They caught the ball and they were just very shifty and nimble with their feet that they could turn a 2-yard or negative catch play into a positive gain where they would get a lot of yards that way. So I think very similar. I think what you see with the style that, Drake London is a bigger physical receiver. Obviously, Kyle Pitts is that type of receiver as well. They could very much, use a lot of tight end screens or the receiver screens, or then definitely Bijan Robinson is a gifted all-around running back. That's where you're going to see a lot of benefit from him too. But I expect to see a lot of screen game as well in Atlanta. So, like Tad said, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I think this is the perfect time to transition here because we're talking about who's going to benefit the most. And so, Tad, I think you wanted to speak about this a little bit here, but like this is now your chance to sort of speak about the guy who's going to benefit the most from this sort of shift in offensive philosophy that will benefit fantasy managers.
Well, speaking of getting ahead of ourselves, I'm pretty sure I'm spoiling an episode about a month down the road. But if I had if you force me to pick today, who's your breakout fantasy star? It's probably going to be Drake London. is my pick. I think Drake London
probably
is
a lot of people's picks. Yeah,
he's a really interesting prospect because this shocked me. In the 2 years he's been in the NFL, he has yet to get over 1,000 yards.
That is surprising. I think he got close once, right?
He did. His rookie year, he was at like 850.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like his rookie year was solid. Last year was very much not. Both years, if I'm remembering correctly, he finished under 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He definitely didn't get over 5 touchdowns last year. So this sounds mean, but he's been, in terms of where his expectations have been, he's been kind of a dud the last 2 years. And I think, and again, with kind of like what you were saying with people prepping and stuff, that a lot of this just relies on, ADP, where they're being drafted. If he goes where I expect him to go, which is like mid rounds, 4, 5, 6, something like that, that's good value for him. But it really wouldn't surprise me if his ADP was actually a little lower than that, like 6, 7, 8, because it's just, we were talking about this with, I think the Tennessee episode, where people are just going to see that ATL next to his name and just get scared off. And I think that's a real possibility of happening. But you look at you brought him up before. Puka Nacua came out fucking nowhere in this offensive system to become a fantasy stud. Did he finish top 5 last year in receivers? Yeah. And Cooper Kupp, also really good, would have finished top 10 had he not, missed those couple games.
Former Triple Crown winner, that Super Bowl year.
Exactly. And exactly. Like, we don't need Cooper Kupp to finish top 10 every year. We know he's good. So this, and plus with all the stats we brought up, they, 3 receivers out there 94% of the time. 70% of the 94% go to receivers. And again, look at the track record of the 2 receivers last year in the same system. Under that passing game coordinator, he relies on his number 1 guy heavily. I remember I tried so hard to trade for Puka once Cooper Kupp went down, because I'm like, damn it, he's going to get the ball so much. And he did. And he made the most of it. Now, it is interesting because is Drake London known for his route running? Not really. And like you said, like Cooper Kupp and Puka, like that's what made him so good, was a very crisp route running. But I think Drake London has the skills to succeed in the system. So he's going to be the number 1 overall target. I think that, we've seen the evidence that receiver is going to be relied on heavily with trading for Rondale Moore, with them signing Darnell. I remember at the time being like, why the hell would you sign Darnell Mooney? And now after I did this research, I'm like, oh, nope, I get it. You need as many receivers as you can get. Got it. Okay. So I think Drake London has a very good chance of being just super productive, super consistent. That's the thing, is like the consistency week in, week out, I think is going to be there, especially because, and this is the point I was kind of mentioning earlier, that defense, as we mentioned, that's the weakness of the team. This team is going to let up a lot of points, which means the offense is going to have to keep up, which means a lot of passing, a lot of opportunities for Drake London. So especially if you're in a half PPR or PPR league, I think Drake London has some really, really, I don't want to quite call him a sleeper yet, because again, I want to see where that ADP ends up being in late July. But if he slips, that is an excellent receiver to grab in the middle rounds, especially because this happens in every year's draft where, there's one position, it's quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever, where, and maybe this is just me thing, where I'm like, okay, I have everything prepped, and all of a sudden, like 6 receivers go, and I'm like, I have no receivers.
It's true.
I'm like, there are no receivers on the board. What do I do? That could be where Drake London really, really comes in handy.
Yeah, so you look at his rookie year, 117 targets, 72 receptions, 866 yards, only 4 touchdowns.
I said, so 4 touchdowns.
Last year, he had 110 targets, 69 reception, 905 receiving yards, and only 2 receiving touchdowns. So yeah, he has never surpassed 5 receiving touchdowns in a season so far. He has 6.
That 2 touchdowns hurts my soul.
Yeah, it's tough.
How do you only score off 100 twice off 110 targets? Oh my God, Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
I very rarely say this, but that man deserved to get fired, especially because of what he did to your pick.
We'll see what happens as far as his success rate with Pittsburgh Steelers now, but maybe a run-heavy concept will be a little bit better in Pittsburgh compared to
Oh, God, now he has Najee Harris. Oh, that's just going to be miserable.
So I know what you sort of alluded to, where it's like, people will look at a player and they'll see that TEN next to their name, they'll be a little bit scared off. But I think it's actually the opposite with Atlanta because I
ATL.
think,
Oh, okay. I see what you're
yeah,
going for.
but I think it's the opposite with Atlanta this year with the ATL because it's like people saw that signing of Kirk Cousins. They're just like automatically, I think this guy is going to pass the ball now. We saw the success that Justin Jefferson had. We saw the emergence of Jordan Addison as well in Minnesota. So it's like, I think we'll see the opposite here. I think they'll see that name. They'll be like, you know what? Now I'm actually going to trust these receiving threats and these players a little bit more compared to what I saw last year. So it's like, I'm thinking the opposite with ATL. So it's like, but I do agree that it's like, I think maybe people will be a little bit still wary because of the, horrendous things that we had to deal with Arthur Smith the last couple of years that maybe are going to be like, can we finally trust them? Can we finally do it? It's like, especially in a first-year head coach, first-year scheme, first-year Zac Robinson calling plays. Like, I mean, is that going to affect things as well? So maybe you'll get a little bit of, trepidation from some managers out there that's like, I don't know. I'm still not sure whether I want to, pull the trigger on Drake London or Kyle Pitts. He's burned me for so many times already in the past couple of seasons. So I can still see a little bit of hesitation, but I think less compared to seeing a Tennessee player, I think for sure.
And that's why I kept bringing up ADP because I completely agree with you. It could go either way.
It could.
It's the Kirk Cousins effect. Is it going to be as big as you predict? Or I think that, still, and maybe I'm undervaluing most fantasy managers' knowledge. But I don't think Kirk Cousins is enough to push the needle so much. But it also wouldn't shock me if Drake London went in the third round. I would be like, okay, that's early, but I get it. But it will be interesting to see, just how much Kirk Cousins pushes the needle one way or the other.
Yeah, so like you talked about, we'll discuss that in a later episode about ADP and where players are going to go and how much things are going to affect it, especially when it comes to fantasy draft. But the guy I want to bring up, maybe it's a little bit of an obvious of a name, but I'm going to say it, Bijan Robinson at the running back position here.
That's a good one.
I definitely agree with you. Drake London, he's going to be the primary target. I've already brought up, the Minnesota factor with Justin Jefferson absolutely fed with Kirk Cousins at the quarterback position. So he was absolutely a fantasy, star, stud, whatever you want to call it there. So Drake London, I could see having that very similar ascent here in Atlanta. But I mean, we brought up a lot of things that I think will suit Bijan Robinson that I kind of already brought up before, where it's like you said, we're going to see a lot of screen heavy concepts. So Bijan Robinson is a very gifted all around running back. And so it's I think we're going to see a lot of screen passes go to him where he's going to be able to get the ball and make a play with the ball in his hand. So it's I can see him doing a lot of things. I can also see something similar to that, Arthur Smith. I mean, I really don't like trashing him so much, but just it's too easy because it's just how bad it was the last couple of seasons to trash just how terrible this offense was and how much of a detriment it was to fantasy managers managing their rosters with Atlanta players. But we saw too much of a split carry with Bijan Robinson. You don't take a guy it was seventh overall, right? If I remember correctly, it was the top 10 pick for sure. It was you don't take a running back top 10 and then split the carries with a fifth round running back in Tyler Algier. As much as I love Tyler Algier, it's no, you invested all of this draft capital into Bijan Robinson. Give him more of the carries. And it's you look at last year, Tad, Algier had 186 carries. Bijan Robinson had 214 carries. So it's it's not that disparate of a carry difference between two running backs. It's just that's going to shift completely this year. I think Bijan Robinson is going to get a lot more of the carries. As good as Tyler Algier is, it's just I think finally they're going to take advantage of the fact that Robinson should be our guy. He'll be a 3-down running back. Like I said, he has that skill set to be useful on passing downs as well as the rushing downs. I mean, just you look at what Robinson with the Falcons last year had 246.3 fantasy points in PPR leagues, and he played in all 17 games. I mean, that's good. But I feel that number could be a lot higher. You see Christian McCaffrey with the season that he had. And I remember, Tad, I was watching a press conference during the training camp or, the OTAs or whatever they call them right now during June, where Bijan Robinson said, he said it jokingly, or maybe it's an allusion to what we'll see with the Falcons offense, but he is I very much envision, trying to be in a Kyle Shanahan offense where just the running back gets fed on every play and he's just an all-around threat. And so, like I said, maybe he wants to be in that type of system, or maybe he's saying, like I said, very subtly, that's this is the shift the offense is taking, where it's they're going to put more of a primary focus on Bijan Robinson. But whatever it is, it's I'm taking that with a little bit of a grain of optimism. That's I think the Falcons are going to be smart here and use Robinson to his fullest potential and really just make him probably a focal point of that offense, regardless of how much money that they gave to Kirk Cousins in the offseason. So Kyren Williams last year with the Los Angeles Rams had 255 fantasy points in PPR leagues, only behind Puka.
So he actually outscored Bijan.
He did. And he only played in 12 games. So what does that tell you about Bijan Robinson? I'd like to think
that's a great
with Zac Robinson coming over from Los Angeles,
stat.
I think we should see a similar set. We'll see some more involvement there. So it's just like overall, like I said, the shift is going to benefit all the skill position players. But like I said, Bijan Robinson's going to be a round one running back for me, 100%. Depending on where I am, that's for sure going to be a round one target for me. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a round one target for a lot of people, but yeah, I very much like him to finally realize that potential a lot of people envisioned when he was drafted as a rookie. I remember that year you made that bold prediction that no rookie was worth.
Well, that's why. So for our listening audience, I've had a shit-eating grin on my face this entire time, and the reason is because yes, we have been trashing him, and I will say the one nice thing about him, Arthur Smith. Thank you. Because yes, that was my hot take riding into last year is don't draft Bijan. I think I said in an episode, he's undraftable in my eyes. It was solely because nothing against him. I knew he was good. Trust me.
Yes.
Trust me. That's when Texas was still in the Big 12. I know Bijan Robinson's good. He fucking smashed my Horned Frogs. But I didn't trust Arthur Smith. Now, I don't know if you remember how last year went, but he got off to a very hot start.
He did.
And so for the first 8 to 10 weeks, all I heard from Al, from my friends, partially from you took a little easy on me, which I appreciate for once.
Yeah, that's fair.
Was just like, wow, yeah, Dad, Bijan Robinson sucks. Yeah, how about that? And I'm just like, God damn it. I'm like, all right, I made that take out right with it. And then week 10, something happened. Like just the weird little flip switched in Arthur Smith's head where, because like you said, Bijan played all 17 games. It wasn't like injury and he kind of struggled. Where all of a sudden Algier just started getting more carries. For some reason, I remember fantasy managers losing their mind because their golden egg, their golden goose, all of a sudden dropped. He was a solid week in, week out running back one, and he dropped on flex option. And then I got to spend the last 7 weeks of the season being like, told you so. I told you so. And so thank you, Arthur Smith, for saving my reputation. But it took him longer to do what I thought he was going to do at the start of the season. And it's just funny because, like you said, Bijan's good. It was nothing ever against his talent. Now, is he top 10 running back? Now, that's a whole separate debate. But in terms of draft, NFL draft, not fantasy drafts. But no, I completely agree with everything you said. And like I said, too, they only ran inside 13% of the time. So if you just stack the edges, of course, the running back's going to struggle. So I think, again, with this more spread out look, with all the passing, and another really important thing to remember, running back by committee was never the Rams' thing. They always wanted one back. I remember because I picked up Kyren Williams. I don't remember if it was the LAFB league or my other league, but I picked up Kyren Williams right as he was getting hot. It was great because I didn't have to worry about, anytime I was watching NFL Red Zone, they're like, Rams at the 2-yard line. I'm like, sweet, because I didn't have to worry about anyone vulturing Kyren's touchdown. It was great. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think Algier is going to be fantasy irrelevant as a result. But I definitely think Bijan is, not quite breakout because we all know he's really good. But he's the perfect back if you're in a 10-man league. I hate when this happens. When you're in a 10-man league, snake draft, and you okay, enter the draft room. Where do I end up? Oh, 6. Damn it. It's 5 and 6, really. 7 is not too bad. But if you land in a 5 or 6 spot, Bijan's perfect for that spot. Because I don't think he's going to be going top 3 or 4.
We'll see. It really just depends. It depends, yeah. On the type of league that you're in. If you're still with a lot of quote unquote old school type of players that prioritize running back, then of course he's gonna go top 5 easily. But if you're going to drafting with a lot of the modern shift where receivers are getting a lot of priority now, so you'll see Tyreek Hill and Puka Nacua possibly go in the top 5. There's a possibility that Bijan Robinson will still be there. But last thing I'll close this out with, and I think it's the perfect thing that you just said. The Los Angeles Rams like to prioritize the number 1 running back. So I already gave the numbers with the Falcons where Bijan Robinson had 214 carries. Tyler Edgill had 186 carries. With the Rams last season, Kyren Williams, had 228 carries. The next closest was Royce Freeman.
Wow.
Wait for this, though. With 77 carries.
For a second there, I thought you were going to say 7. I was so excited for
that.
No, that's still insane. Yeah.
Further establish my point. That's Bijan Robinson is the guy that you want to prioritize in the round 1.
If I'm doing my math right, that's approximately 3-to-1 split.
Easily, close to it. Close to it. But yeah, so that also speaks to the fact that it's like Bijan Robinson is sure to get a lion's share of the targets and touches in this offense for sure. So yeah, like 100% feel a lot safer with the Bijan Robinson pick. I can understand if you're a little bit more hesitant with the, Kyle Pitts and the Drake Londons and your Darnell Moody's and your Rondell Moores. Like, I mean, that may be a little bit more hesitant, but Bijan Robinson, like, that's like a, pound the table type of player. Like, that's a guy you can feel ultimate confidence in. So it's
I'm going 180. I'm going 180. He's got my stamp of approval this year, 100%.
So I know we're still early, Tab, but really quick as we sort of close out the episode, but just like, you're in an auction draft. So it's like, is this a guy that you would pay like, a lot of your budget on for?
Yeah,
or see, I'm like, a little bit hesitant.
That's
like,
the funny thing with how you worded that with a lot of your budget. Because so for those of you who don't know, you start off with $200 for your entire team. So if you spend like, and God, I've never seen a number this high, but if you spend like $80 on one player, you're gonna need to do some bargain bin shopping for the rest of your roster.
Exactly.
So I try to make it a strategy, not to go for over 60, unless like I'm really hurting and it's like the last good play. Like I know this guy is good. Then I'll usually go over 60. This is why auction drafts are so good, because you got to make your call in the moment. It's a gut feeling at the end of the day. If he went over 60, I'd probably lay off.
Okay.
If I could get him for around 55, I'd be pretty happy.
Oh, that'd be sensational.
Yeah.
That'd be sensational. So
most like top tier running backs go for like mid 60s. So while I talk big game, I never go over 60. I usually do it for one player. But if it was him in that, because for those of you who don't know, auction drafts, you, instead of like a snake draft,
you nominate a player.
So like what I always do is I nominate a player who's like good, but I don't really like.
Yeah.
And so I always try to get, because people will always pay more at first. But anyway, if he's like the last good running back on the board, then I'm going over 60. But yeah, that'll be interesting. But yes, no, he's, in my mind, and it was funny because I was thinking while you were talking, I'm like, okay, Christian McCaffrey is definitely better fantasy wise. And I'm trying to think of like other running backs I'd take over Bijan, and I'm kind of struggling. So I think you might be right. He might be a top 3 candidate.
Easily. So like we talked about, we'll get to that a little bit later once we figure out ADPs and we get a better idea as far as where our rankings are going to play out. But yeah, 100%. I think we're both in agreement that Robinson's a guy that you easily want to target if you're in the first round, especially around, picks 3 to 5, like somewhere that's a good range that I'd probably take him right there. For sure.
I like Robinson. I'm just like doing my Rolodex of like best backs in the league. Robinson over Saquon for sure.
Yes, I think
Saquon's going to, speaking of split carries, Saquon's value is actually going to be interesting because I think he's going to lose a lot of carries.
I agree with that. So we'll get out to that later episodes for sure. But yeah, we appreciate everybody who tuned in for today's episode, diving into Raheem Morris and his new head coaching stint with the Atlanta Falcons and how the offense is going to shift. Brought up at the top of the episode, but we've done a lot of other head coaching deep dives already. We've covered Jim Harbaugh and Gerard Mayo and lots of other coaches that have been hired. So we only got one left in our series here. We got Mike McDonald with the Seattle Seahawks. That is going to be our last episode in this head coaching series. But guys, make sure you tune back to all those previous episodes. And like Tad brought up already, this is the kickoff of like all of our deep fantasy content that we got for you. So after this will end, like Tad said, he'll take a little bit of a brief vacation, travel up to Michigan, see his family, and then after that, come back. We'll be diving heavy into all fantasy when it comes to rankings and sleepers and busts. And we were talking about ADP, but we'll talk about auction values as well. And frequently asked questions, a lot of FAQs as well. So we'll get into all of that. And the best way to stay up to date with all of that is happening is make sure you hit us up on all our social media handles, which you got the ticker coming right there, right down below. You got us on Twitter. You got me at OtherSide23. You got Tad Decide 94. You got the show handle at The Decide Guys. And of course on Instagram at The Decide Guys as well. So hit us up. We'd love to hear your thoughts about Raheem Morris, all the previous head coaches that we've done. We'd love to hear, who do you think is going to benefit the most from this Atlanta offense? I mean, just anything and everything. We'd love to hear from you about these head coaches, other players. Like I said, this is fantasy time. So ask your questions. Who do you want us to cover? Who do you want, analysis on? Me and Tad will be there for you as you get ready for your fantasy football drafts. As mentioned, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channels, so you're always up to date with the head coaching series, as well as all of our future episodes when it comes to fantasy content. And guys, even though they're not giving you fantasy content, which is the time right now, but they're giving you a lot of great sports content when it comes to the LA football teams. Make sure you subscribe and give support to the LAFB network, because without them, there would be no us. They're giving you a lot of great content when it comes to the Rams and the Chargers at the professional level, and the Bruins and the Trojans when it comes to the college football level. So lots of great content coming from all the guys over there at LAFB network. But guys, to everybody who's already, listening to the podcast, who's watching the videos, who's interacting with us on social media, I mean, just anything and everything that you're doing to support the podcast, we can't thank you enough.
Breece Hall, maybe?
That's really dependent on Aaron Rodgers. Like, I mean, that's the big crux in that team. Like, if he's healthy, sure, I trust a lot of people on that team. But if he's not healthy, I mean, we saw it last year, Ted. We saw it last year.
Jahmyr Gibbs?
Not more than Bijan. I like Bijan more than Jahmyr.
Well, we'll have all those answers for you in about a month, because like Amir said, we have all types of fantasy content about to come out. I can guarantee you position rankings are going to be exactly like that. Amir makes great graphics that you can check out on social media, Twitter, Facebook. Actually, we don't put it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And also, don't forget, guys, a very easy way to communicate with us is via Instagram, but also Reddit. LAFB Network just created a Reddit page about a month ago. It's doing really well. I have a ton of good interactions there. So if you want to kind of debate, not just with us, if you want to debate, USC, UCLA, Rams, Chargers, I'm sure there's some baseball fans in there, Dodgers, because God knows I'm not talking to anyone about the Dodgers. That's the place to do it with all the great writers and other podcasters at LAFB Network. So be sure to go on Reddit if you're on Reddit and subscribe to that page, join that page, wherever the terminology is. And then, as always, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and stay safe.